And now we start a new session of the conference with a person that I shouldn't say that, maybe I really love, I really admire. I have a profound admiration for this young kid because when he was 15 years old, he hasn't made a website. He hasn't made another app to share photos. He has made a sticker for pancreatic cancer when he was 15 years old. Take a look at this video first.
Okay, here you go. This is our moment you missed. He's not on the Golden Gate Bridge. Pancreatic cancer is one of the most difficult cancers to diagnose, but thanks to this 15-year-old boy, spotting it just got easier. Now, enjoying his celebration there is Jack Andraka. Just won the world's largest science fair by creating a new test for pancreatic cancer. 38,000 Americans will be diagnosed with the disease just this year. About 34,000 will die from it. Andraka's dipstick sensor could make a dramatic difference. 100 times. Get that 100 times more sensitive, Lisa, than the current test. So he should be celebrating. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you know that test, it only costs pennies. For his work, I was looking this up online, reading it up online, John. I think he gets 70.
Oh, please welcome Jack Andraka. Come on, Jack.
Have you ever experienced a moment in your life that was so painful and confusing that all you wanted to do was learn as much as you could to make sense of it all? When I was 13, a close family friend passed away from pancreatic cancer. When the disease hit so close to home, I knew I needed to learn more. So I went online to find answers. And using the internet, I found a variety of sources on pancreatic cancer, and what they said is that 85% of them are diagnosed late, when someone has less than a 2% chance of survival. And I was thinking, why on earth are we so bad at detecting pancreatic cancer? The reason? Our current modern medicine is a 60-year-old technique. I mean, that's older than my dad. But also, it costs $800 per test and is grossly inaccurate, missing 30% of all pancreatic cancers. Your doctor would have to be ridiculously suspicious that you have the cancer in order to give you this test. Learning this, I was sure there had to be a better way. And so I went to any teenager's source for information, Google, Wikipedia, and essentially I found what a center for pancreatic cancer would really have to look like in order to effectively diagnose the cancer. The sensor would have to be inexpensive, rapid, simple, sensitive, selective, and minimally invasive. Now, I was pretty sure I could do this, however, I wasn't exactly quite sure how. So I went back to Google and Wikipedia, and I finally stumbled across this one article that essentially listed out 8,000 different proteins that are found in your bloodstream when you have these different cancers. And you see, when we're looking for these cancers, we're looking at your bloodstream. Essentially, we're looking for these tiny changes in this amount of protein there. And this sounds really straightforward, but it's anything but. Because essentially, you have liters and liters of protein that's already abundant in your bloodstream. And you're looking for this minute variation in this tiny amount of protein. And so it's next to impossible. It's kind of like trying to find a needle in a stack of nearly identical needles. However, I was undeterred, and I decided to just go through all 8,000 of these proteins. And since it was summer break and I had nothing better to do, and so essentially I locked myself in my room and started dashing out these things on my computer, like looking at all this literature. And finally, at the end of the summer, when I was close to losing any possibility for future social interaction, because I had locked myself in my room for like 3 months, I eventually found one protein called mesothelin that could work. And mesothelin is just your ordinary run-of-the-mill type protein, unless you have pancreatic, ovarian, and lung cancer, in which case it's found at these very high levels in your bloodstream. But also, the key is that it's found in the earliest stages of the disease, when someone has close to a 100% chance of survival. So now that I found a protein that could potentially detect pancreatic cancer, I then shifted my focus to actually detecting the cancer and thus the presence of the disease. And I kind of had this epiphany moment in this journey where all the pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together. And that came in the most unlikely of places. High school biology class, the absolute stifler of innovation, particularly with my biology teacher. You see, essentially what happened is I'd snuck in an article on what are called single-walled carbon nanotubes, which are these long, thin pipes of carbon that are an atom thick and 1/50,000th the diameter of your hair. So they're extremely small, but they have these amazing properties. They're kind of like the superheroes of material science. So essentially, I was reading about all these articles. I kind of tucked it into my biology book, and I was suavely reading it under my desk, thinking, I'm never going to get caught doing this, right? However, we were learning about things called antibodies, which are essentially molecules that only react with one specific protein. And what's so cool about these is that they only target that one protein, nothing else. In this case, that protein would essentially be a cancer biomarker that I discovered, mesothelin. And I was just sitting in biology class reading this article when all of a sudden it hit me. I could kind of combine these two different concepts. Oh, there we go. Essentially, you could combine these two different concepts. You would take these antibodies and weave them into this network of nanotubes, such that you have a network that only reacts with one specific protein. But also, what's so cool is that this network would only react with one specific protein and would change its electrical properties based on the amount of that protein present, and thus tell me whether or not you had pancreatic cancer. However, there's one catch with this. You see, these networks of nanotubes, they're really flimsy. And since they're so delicate, they need to be supported. So I chose to use paper. And making a paper sensor for pancreatic cancer is about as simple as making chocolate chip cookies, which I love. I mean, if I get a B on the test, there goes the chocolate chip cookies. So essentially, you start with some water, you pour in the nanotubes, add some antibodies, and then you take some paper, dip it, dry it, and you can detect cancer. And just as soon as I had this realization, I realized I'm going to need a lab. You see, me and my brother had done some pretty crazy stuff at home. I mean, we have like this thing of uranium down in the basement. We have like high voltage electronics. We made like explosives on our like countertop, and I even cultured E. coli where we make sandwiches. However, we couldn't really have the Andraka household cancer research program. My mom wasn't going to have any of that. So essentially what happened is I was thinking, I can get into a lab, right? I mean, this is a pretty good idea. So I typed up this 32-page behemoth of a document, including my procedure, data, timeline, budget, and materials list, and he sent it out to 200 different professors at Johns Hopkins University and the National Institute of Health, essentially asking them, hey, can I work in your lab, plus read this huge document? And so then I sat back waiting for all these positive emails to respond and say like, oh, I get to pick and choose my lab. Boy, genius is going to be like on Time cover. No, my lofty dream soon hit a wall. And over the course of that month, I got 199 rejections. And each time, I kind of kept saying to myself, don't worry, these people are just being cynical. They're just sour Sallies, right? However, by the end, I was really feeling down. I mean, 199 people had told me no. I could deal with my parents. I mean, they didn't know anything. Then I could deal with my biology teacher. I hated her. But 199 professionals, I was like, geez, this idea might not be as good as I thought. However, I got one positive email from Dr. Anirban Maitra at Johns Hopkins University. So I go in for this big interview with him, with 500 plus journal articles. I walk in thinking standard interview, right? It's going to be like, what's your favorite color? What's your name? Stuff like that, easy stuff, right? No, this guy like actually knew his stuff. Like I couldn't bamboozle him like I could my parents. And then I'm like just getting these rapid fire questions fired at me. I have like 28 PhDs interviewing me, plus the professor all crammed in this tiny room. It was like really hot in there. And I guessed on so many of those questions. And I was like freaking out. I'm never going to get into this lab. However, at the end, I finally got the lab space I needed. And as soon as I started this, I realized I have no idea what I'm doing here. I mean, first day, walked into the lab, he's like, okay, you're going to have to culture some cells. I'm like, that should be easy, right? I mean, you just like pour some cells in. No, like I sneezed in the flask on the very first day. I'm thinking, oh, it'll fight off, like, it's like an infection, it's an immune system, right? Cells are like that. No, it was like these giant tentacles growing out of it on the very next day. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? So we threw those out, and then I started again. Then I cooked them in the incubator. And then I dropped them, and then I froze them, and I just killed them in every way imaginable. However, after like a month of screwing up, I finally got all the cell culture I needed and promptly blew it up in my centrifuge. And then I started again for another month, and then finally I got to a procedure, the worst procedure ever, the Western blot. Essentially, it was to optimize to make sure my antibody was working. And so you have to have these really clear bands at like certain areas. If not, then you're just screwed, like you mess up the entire thing. So I go in, I'm like, first day, like this blank sheet. I'm like, that does not look anything like the picture I'm supposed to get. And then I got like a complete black sheet, and then I got blurry lines. And then after 7 months of screwing every possible lab procedure up in that lab, I finally ended up with one small paper sensor, costs 3 cents, takes 5 minutes to run. This makes it 168 times faster, over 26,000 times less expensive, and over 400 times more sensitive than our current methods of detection. But also, what's so cool about this sensor is that it can detect the cancer in the very earliest stages, when someone has close to 100% chance of survival. But also, so far, it is 100% accuracy. And in the next 2 to 5 years, this patent-pending sensor could potentially lift the once dismal pancreatic cancer survival rates from 5.5% to close to 100%, and would do similar for ovarian and lung cancer. But it wouldn't stop there. By changing out that antibody I use, you could potentially detect any protein in the world, meaning any disease, ranging from Alzheimer's to other forms of cancer, even HIV, AIDS, and heart disease. So the applications are pretty much limitless. And you could like monitor what cancers like it's resistant to, what treatments, and then also you could do everything imaginable with this. So my one hope for this in the future is that we can all have that extra few months with that one parent, that one uncle, what loved one, and hopefully make the world a better place. And one of the most interesting things I learned throughout this entire journey is that through the internet, anything is possible. Theories can be shared, and you don't have to be a professor with multiple degrees to have your ideas valued. You can be a 15-year-old with a dream, like me. I mean, it doesn't matter what age you are, what ethnicity, how much money you have, none of that matters. It's just your ideas that count on the internet. So instead of posting a picture of your food on Instagram or going and posting a status on Facebook, you could be changing the world. Because think, if a 15-year-old who didn't quite know what a pancreas was could find a new way to detect pancreatic cancer, just imagine what you could do. Thank you.